Hey.
Christian. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this conversation with me. I recently did an online event with you. It was a heart IQ facilitator training, virtual. It's quite spectacular and quite unlike anything I've ever seen. The quality was like superb. The content was superb. The facilitation was excellent. So I really wanted to do a conversation with you so I can also share about this work with people that I interact with. So thank you for agreeing
Amazing.
to
Yeah,
this
you're
conversation.
welcome. I'm so glad that the virtual live stream translated. It's something I had a dream about, this idea of can this be got as a transmission around the world? We had watch parties in Sydney and America, and it was so cool to hear the impact, even though we were in the room doing the work, but it was impacting everyone around the world. It was so cool.
Yeah. So before Hard IQ, how did you like? Can you give like an overview, like um, about your own experience with Hard IQ? Like, who are you? What do you
Mm.
do?
Well, um, yeah, I would say, specific area of um, kind of like gift into the world, if you like, is centered around group and collective work. This is where people are doing their deep inner work, their shadow work, their awakening, their healing work, together with others in tribe, and how to leverage group amplified fields and to tap into an
Hmm.
intelligence that is beyond me, but is part of the we. And how can I facilitate, like a conductor of an orchestra, the different kind of instruments and messages and parts of this group into something that's coherent and resonant and allows for us to awaken together far quicker and deeper than we can on our own. I mean, if this was easier or better done one to one, I would do one to one. But I have found that we can go deeper, further, in a more profound way together. And so that's my speciality, is
Yeah.
group work. And it kind of came from a mixture of different parts of my life. I mean, before Heart IQ was even called Heart IQ, I always had a capacity to read energy and read what's going on in the room. And some of that's just unique to each of us as we grow up. But for me, there was specific parts of my childhood that developed this skill. This is a great example of how trauma or things like wounding and how we develop as children can inform our gifts. So, I had a bit of a rageaholic dad that I wouldn't know when he would have his next temper or outburst. And so I had to learn very quickly to like leave my body and check the environment and scan for safety. And so I became very good at picking up on cues of when somebody's in tension and when someone's about to emote and am I safe? And this became a skill born out of a wound, really. And I've transformed that
Mm.
into a superpower, one might say.
Yeah, yeah, the way you facilitate is really
Thank you.
incredible. So, can you give like a short overview of all the things that you offer and like the trainings and the different retreats and a brief
Yeah,
description?
so for example, the core area that Hard IQ is doing right now is actually training the next generation of facilitators. I am feeling nostalgically connected to legacy and like, well, what happens if I don't do this anymore? And for the last 20 odd years, I've been working diligently in creating spaces for people to do their healing work. And at different times, I've attempted to train other facilitators. And I think only in this last year did I actually understand. Now I think I have all the keys. to unlock that that secret sauce to be able to train other facilitators. So I'd say one big thing that we're doing is taking people who are interested in this modality and empowering them with the tools and the what we're calling embodied leadership. And this is very important because embodied leadership
Mm,
is it's not just the techniques that you learn, but who you are as the teacher. In other words, our embodiment, our connection to our full kind of expanded self, like doing the inner work and owning our own shadows and expanding our own range is as if not more important than the techniques of the modality itself. So the that's kind of what I do is I give retreats for leaders, for facilitators, for those people who want to go deep, not just for themselves personally, but who also are light workers or healers, coaches, therapists. They're out in the world already or want to do it more. And they want to be empowered by a school that can really support them in becoming the best version of themselves personally and professionally. And so that's the first thing.
mm,
It's called
mm,
HeartIQ Academy. It's our school for anybody who's like fascinated by group facilitation and wants to master it and wants to be supported with an education that really empowers them to do their best work. Um, then we got our shadow work series of events, and this is more focused still for those leaders, facilitators, but it's designed to give specific tools on how to facilitate an awakening and integration of people's shadows. And shadows, the way I define that is everything that's not allowed. So those parts of us that we have said, this isn't okay, I can't be this. It's not allowed to show up and express my fire or have anger or be in my grief or to be jealous or to express these qualities. Those qualities that we deny are often the very qualities that we need to really flourish and be all that we are. So shadow work is about coming home and bringing with us all those parts back home so we become more whole. So we have a series of
mm,
retreats around shadow work. And then we've got our couples work. So when this work gets when it touches our hearts, we naturally want to share it with those that we love. And I think one of the best practice places to bring Heart IQ into everyday life is through our intimate romantic relationships. And so bringing people as
mm,
couples into circle and having tribe support couples, it sounds scary. And a lot of couples, they don't like it because even the idea of going to a therapist, like a couples coach, and being seen in their pain and in their stuff, it's very hard for some couples because they think they should know better and they should have it all figured out. But to support couples in tribe is absolutely amazing. I think essential. I think we're coming back. I think part of Hard IQ's mission is to return back to the idea of village, of the fact that we need one another to grow, to connect, to deepen. And it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to have a healthy relationship. I think takes a village to have a healthy sense of self. And within that village,
mm,
I'm a big fan of brotherhood and sisterhood. This this coming together of men and women in an empowered way. And so a lot of my work over the last years has been doing men's work as well, because there is a different flavor and a different frequency that men share together that's different when we're in a mixed group. And I wouldn't say one is better than the other. I just think both are necessary. Um, the same goes for
mhm,
sisterhood spaces, but
mm,
that's obviously facilitated by somebody else. Um, and then the
mhm.
final piece you asked, so I'm just going to give down the list. Um,
Yeah,
we,
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah,
have
yeah.
this incredible venue called New Eden in the Netherlands. I founded this with my business partner back in 2015, and it's a beautiful residential retreat center surrounded by 50 acres of forest in nature. And it's where we can do our best work and our retreats But it's also the place where we have developed a transformational hub. So we've converted part of the retreat center into a a living, breathing residency where people can come for 2 weeks or maybe longer and feel what it feels like to live in an environment that is powered by this transformational technology of HeartIQ. So
Mhm.
the basics is people come and they like rent a room in this retreat space for a couple of weeks or more, and we have a sauna, a heated pool, a home cinema, a place to meet and do circle work. We have a loose structure of program, like we have certain types of circles that we might offer, or different ways that we might connect in the evenings as a community. All the meals are taken care of by an in-house chef. So it's like a conscious resort. It's different to a retreat in that you're not coming just to have a short. It's more like I'm coming to bring my life to New Eden. So people bring their work, their projects. They may come with their partner, and we co-create community in real time in an emergent way. So this is
Mhm.
like the practice ground. And we call this the liberated living residency. And we are building that
Mm.
more and more. Over time, New Eden will gradually open its doors where this is available all year round. So that's a super exciting thing that we're doing where people
Mhm.
can, uh, yeah, take 2 weeks, a month, 3 months if they want, you know, and come live in tribe and see what it feels like to actually live this way, rather than just have it be a concept. So that's super exciting.
Wow. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
I think those are the core
Thank you.
ones.
Yeah. Mm. So about Hard IQ, how did you come to create this or discover? Because this formula, it has different components. Like, how was your path to put this all together?
Yeah. So on one
Mhm.
side, or one way to answer that is, it's an evolving body of work, and therefore over the last, I would say 20 years, because my background professionally is as a chiropractor. So I trained for 5 years in the Anglo-European College of Chiropractic and was very much into the health and wellness area. So graduating as a chiropractor, I was already in the mindset of healing and supporting people's nervous systems to, specifically because I was a wellness chiropractor. That is not a chiropractor focused on pain, but a chiropractor that was focused on helping people live their best life. So that was kind of part of my world when I graduated in 2002. And that's like 23 years ago from this video recording. So for 23 years, I've
Mm.
been in the practice of evolving what is the best way that I can bring people into themselves and to optimize their healing and their well-being. And that's been a pathway. So it started with chiropractic, but then I started to, I had this wonderful mentor called Neil Donald Walsh. He was a guy who wrote a book called Conversations with God. It's not a religious book, even though it sounds like it. It's actually a book about life and about empowerment and awakening. And when I read it, I thought that he was talking directly to my soul. It was one of the most inspiring things. And I remember during chiropractic college reading his book and going, I need to work with this guy. I don't know why. I don't know how. I mean, he's a New York Times bestselling author. He sold millions of copies of this book. How am I supposed to get in front of this guy? And when I graduated as a chiropractor, I made it my mission to go seek him out. So literally within the next year, I was at one of his events in Portland, Oregon, and just following the breadcrumbs, basically, just doing what I could do. And then I had this idea. It was a crazy idea, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to give it a go. I was thinking, if I'm going to be mentored by this man, I can't just knock on his door and ask. He has so many requests. how do I differentiate myself? How am I going to be unique in this space? So I decided to do something a little bit different by showing up in such a way that he couldn't miss me. Like, it was going to be so obvious that he would want to mentor me that I'm just going to make it an easy win for him to say yes. So I decided
Mm-hmm.
to reach out to different groups where he already had people studying his work. So they were called Conversations with God study groups. This is where people would gather together on a weekly basis, take a topic from the book, and they would basically have like a study group. These already pre-existed. The databases were online. You can look them up, and you could basically go visit a group and join and be part of the work. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to reach out to every single one of these group leaders and just tell them that I am willing to travel and pay literally to come and do a talk about his work. And all I would need is a bed to sleep and an invitation to maybe open up to some donations. And of course, most of them were saying yes. And most of them were from the United States, but I also had some in Australia and Europe. And I basically took the courageous step. I sold my chiropractic practice that had just started. I sold my personal belongings, closed my rent from where I was living, and I bought my ticket and I went for it. I went to the United States and I traveled from state to state, workshop to workshop, went to the one study group to the next study group to the next study group. And all I did is show up and talk about the book. Now, it was a kind of an arrogant, bold move because I hadn't even been trained in his work. So I'd only read his book and done a few personal development seminars here and there. I was not an authority on his work, but people didn't care because they were like, hey, free speaker. He's passionate. He's coming from the UK. He must have something important to say. So like I I
Mm-hmm.
I had a tour where in 3 months, in 90 days, I did, I think, 50 different talks in 30 states around the United States. Bam, bam, whistle stop tour. And I just went, pow, 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 pow. This was like in 2003, 2004, right? This was like 22 years ago. This is how it all, this is, I know this is a long story,
Mm-hmm.
but you asked how it started. So this is kind of how it
Yeah, yeah,
got
yeah,
birthed.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was doing these tours and halfway through I kind of burnt out. I was like, Jesus, this is a lot. Uh, and I took a little sabbatical vacation for a couple of weeks in Arizona. And I was in this town called Sedona. And I was sitting at a concert one night, listening to some panpipes, as you do in Sedona. It's kind of a spiritual town. They're all kind of into that stuff. And and I was sitting next to this
Mm-hmm.
woman who we started chatting during the break. Uh, and she asked, she said, "What are you up to?" And I said, I'm doing a tour, uh, and I'm sharing about this incredible book. It's called Conversations with God. Have you read it? And she goes, "Well, I hope so, because my husband wrote it." I'm like, "What?" And I found out I was sitting next to Nancy Donald Walsh, his wife. And she was so inspired by the story. We met up the next day at Starbucks. And then she literally picked up the phone and said to Neil, "You have got to meet this guy. What he's doing is just amazing." And she arranged for us to have private one-to-one time. And then what started happening is
Mm.
he started receiving calls from all the study group leaders saying, "Do you know there's this guy from the UK who's coming around on his own money, in his own time, sharing, he's like a preacher, preaching your body of work." Neil started to hear his wife, his team, everybody started to talk about, who the hell is this guy who's traveling around the world talking about Neil's work? Now, of course, this is what started to open his eyes to, it wasn't me directly knocking on his door. Everyone else was knocking on his door. I was just doing my thing. And it's actually a profound lesson for how to get somebody's attention. Um, because now he was pulled
Mm.
in rather than
Mm.
me trying to come to him. And he
Mm-hmm.
invited me into a facilitator training. which occurred right at the end of 2003. So right after this 90-day tour, I went into a facilitator training experience with him. And part of this facilitator training was a hot seat where you got to sit in a chair, and him and about 8 others of his team were in a panel, and they would just ask tons of questions about the book, the material, and to see, are you really able to kind of like be in that kind of fire? All the other people in that facilitator training, all they had done was read the book. But I had just come out of 90 days of daily talks, answering questions continuously from people who were real
Mhm.
and were curious. And so for me, it felt like the 90 days that I just did was like the preparation, the pre-training. So I came into that hot seat
Mhm.
and they asked all their questions. They tried to trick me, and I nailed it to the point where
Mhm.
Neil's jaw dropped, and he was like, he couldn't believe it. He says, "You're going to become my protege, and I don't care how much it's going to cost. We're going to travel the world. I'm going to teach you everything that I know." He goes, "I have never experienced anybody articulate this work. You can do that better, if not as well as I can," he said. It was like profound
Mhm.
testimonial from him. And that began our relationship. And I started to learn from him in that regard. And that was like the seed of kind of like the work.
Mhm.
The work of Heart IQ,
Yeah.
if I were to put it into a sentence, is this. Neil's book spoke about unity consciousness, but it doesn't give you a way to experience it. Heart IQ is a technology that allows you to live and breathe and experience unity consciousness. It's the way, it was almost like when I studied Neil's work, it was like, this is the way that the world could and should be. But it was words, and he could talk a great talk, and he could speak and share it and write the wisdom. But I needed a way for people to embody it, to experience it, to somatically connect to it, to awaken to this potential, to rewrite stories in the DNA, and to like expand people's emotional energetic range to meet the trauma that's in the way of us really feeling that unity and that oneness and that God
Mm.
self that he spoke about. And so,
Mhm.
out of the inspiration of Conversations with God, Circle and Heart IQ was born as a way to give people a direct experience of that work. And so, for the last
Mm.
20 years,
Wow.
I have looked at what are the ways that I can give people a more profound experience of that unity consciousness. And that's always
Wow.
been at the center of my mission. Even though Neil and I are no longer working together, and because our paths diverged, his book is still my mission at the core. It started Heart IQ.
Wow.
It was the foundation of the philosophy of which touches me to this day, and it's the collective wisdom and the channel that opened up for what uh, you know for the work that we do. Circle is not about trauma,
Mm.
although we might meet trauma. It's not about, um, you know, getting into your purpose and finding your true Dharma, but you might find your true Dharma in Circle. The essence of Circle is around coming into oneness, coming into unity, coming into the remembrance of who we really are. It's a remembrance.
Mm.
It's like you drop in and suddenly you remember. It's like, I remember who I am, what my soul, what I'm, you know, I don't know how, if you've ever had this experience, but so often I can get caught up in everyday life and work, relationship, stresses. And it's like the soul gets forgotten sometimes. the remembrance of what it's truly like to feel home, and
Mm.
circle is a place to remember and to find our people, and to find the tribe
Mm.
that we long to connect with, who can come home with us. So that's kind of like a long version
Mm.
of part of the story. There are other components to how HeartIQ was born, but
Uh,
that's the one that came up today.
mhm. Thank you. That was a really beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. Now, shadow work, um, the way that people know it, Carl Jung wrote about it, and there are Jungian psychologists. But to make it tangible, like for people who are not familiar with it, how does the shadow, from your point of view, develop and what to do with
Hmm.
it?
So, from the perspective that we take in HeartIQ, shadow is the result of unowned parts of us that were not allowed to be. So, probably the easiest way to describe it is each of us have a deep need for connection and belonging and validation. And growing up, especially in those first formative years before the age of 7, we're constantly adjusting our behavior in order to meet needs. So when we grow up in a family system that, for example, offers love based on these conditions, like you are loved when you behave sweet, kind, and nice, but as soon as you express temper tantrums, or you go angry, or you defy authority, that's punished. That's not allowed. The child begins to very quickly create a world view where certain things are allowed and certain things are not allowed. And what the child begins to do is exaggerate the qualities that bring connection and validation, and hide the qualities that bring shame, rejection, or separation.
Mm-hmm.
When we exile and remove parts, it's called the shadow. And when we amplify and exaggerate parts, it's called the persona. So our persona and our shadow
Mm-hmm.
develop in tandem from a young age together. So another word for the persona are the masks we wear. It's the it's
Mm-hmm.
the like for me, my persona, it's called I've given it a name. It's called glossy pamphlet. Glossy pamphlet. And for those who may not understand the word pamphlet, pamphlet is like a marketing brochure. Um, so a glossy is shiny. So my persona is, as long as I'm bright, put together well, looking good, when I've got my shit together, when I can speak with a razzle dazzle and the charisma and magnetism, then I'm going to get validated. Then I'm going to be connected with, and all of me is accepted. But I then have to deny
Mm-hmm.
being messy, showing more uglier, maybe different parts of me that may be authentic, but I'm like, I can't show that because that's not part of the image of glossy pamphlet. And this creates a
Mm.
split. And this split is where anxiety, tension, and exhaustion can come from. It's like to live a lie, maybe a lie is too strong of a word, to live a a dynamic where we're emphasizing one part of our being but holding back another. That holding back takes energy. So our life force is often
Mm-hmm.
trapped in our shadow because it takes energy
Mm.
to push it down, and that energy we constantly use to push away is what builds what we call bound energy. It's like a lot of this life force is bound up in our shadow ranges. And so shadow work is the liberation of the life force that comes as we explore those shadows in a somatic way. Because it's not enough to simply own your shadows intellectually. Like, we could have a discussion about our shadows. Like, I could say to you, like I just did, one of my shadows is to be really messy. And when I say messy, let's be specific. Incomplete, not masterful, a student, still learning. So let's say, for example, one of my passions is dancing, and specifically like Latin dancing, like salsa dancing. I don't do it anymore. My travel has made that harder, but I used to do it a lot. And somebody would often ask me, shall we go salsa dancing? And I was like, you know what? I need a few weeks to practice my moves, go to a few lessons, get back into the groove. Then I can bring myself to you. It was like, I need to be great and at least good enough to be my glossy pamphlet version of a salsa dancer, because I cannot show you the fact that I'm out of rhythm. I cannot show you that I'm clumsy. I cannot show you that I make mistakes, because I don't want to risk being rejected and being that type of guy that's stepping on his
Mhm.
own feet and not having rhythm, and now is no longer attractive, and I can't kind of like get my need met for connection. So
Mhm.
I prevent the enjoyment of having a time and a moment of spontaneity for the sake of, I need to look good and practice my moves and be a finished package all wrapped up with a beautiful bow, and then I can be this package for somebody and they will love me, right? And so this
Yeah.
is a classic
Mhm.
shadow. The shadow is around, I can't be a mess, I can't be incomplete. And that creates a lot of rigidity. It creates a lot of what do you call that? Um, Strategicness, headiness. It has an impact in life. I'm not free. I'm not loose. I'm not able to be fully me. I'm not, and I'm also just not having fun in
Mhm.
life. So all these qualities are now wrapped in that shadow. So shadow work in Heart IQ is not just becoming aware that I have that shadow, because we've just done that part. I'm aware of it.
Mhm.
Awesome. A lot of people say a shadow is something you're not aware of. No, no, we can have many shadows that we're aware of. What makes it a shadow is the fact that we don't know how to access that range or that part in everyday life. So the shadow is
Mm.
not that which is hidden, it's that which is inaccessible, because we have deemed it wrong and we don't know how to include it in life as in an integrated way.
Mhm.
So shadow work is actually
Mhm.
now, like, for example, in this example, how can I practice bringing my messy, incomplete parts, be witness in that in tribe, and dare to feel all the charge, the fears, the like what's going to happen, the rejection potential, and to allow myself to be loved through it, and to realize,
Mhm.
that wasn't so bad. Or, whoa, that was really bad, but I'm still alive. I'm okay. And in fact, I can deal with rejection. And the resilience grows. So this
Mhm.
is shadow
Mhm.
work. It's the somatic embodied connection to the ranges that we have denied because we need connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. So during Hard IQ, like for people who have not seen this or who don't know this, when you do a Hard IQ and you circle work, what does it mean to go on the mat?
Yeah. Well, let me just define that for those people who may be new, because the way
Yeah.
that we work in Circle is that Circle offers so many uh, different ways to be met. So we sit in the round, hence the word sitting in circle. Um, And people can share it into the space like any traditional circle. That's not new. Circle work's been around for millennia. People sharing their hearts, people sharing their truth, being felt, talking sticks, you name it. There has been different ways that people have used circle to bring themselves into connection and community. And so, of course, HeartIQ is a strong culture around that. But it also adds a layer, as you just said,
Mhm.
about getting on the mat. So in the center of the circle, there is a mat. Some people might call it a carpet or whatever it is. It's a space that people can go and do some work. Now, in some traditions of circle, getting on the mat is actually going into process, meaning they want to work on
Mhm.
an issue, an emotional part of their life and their world that is causing them, contraction, problems, restrictions. Uh, that's not really the way HeartIQ uses the mat or the center of the circle. The easiest way to
Mhm.
explain would be this. The mat is a liberation space. And when people get on the mat, they are invited to look at how can they open more in that moment. How can they connect in the present moment to what they need to come more alive, to feel more connected, to feel more open, and to move towards their desire, to move towards their joy, to move towards what they need without thinking,
Mhm.
I need to work on this issue. So we don't bring the issue to the
Mhm.
foreground. We bring, what does the heart long for, in the foreground. And what we've noticed is that when people move towards what they want, when they move towards what brings them joy, when they're moving forward to opening their heart, all of what comes up is usually their pain or their trauma or their stories of why they can't receive it, why they can't have access to it, why that's not possible. So rather than
Mhm.
searching for
Mhm.
our pain, we search for our joy and our pain will find us. And when that pain comes, because it inevitably does, because there is a virus in the human mind that I call core unworthiness, this story that we're not okay, we're not enough, there's something wrong with us, that we don't deserve happiness at some level, we don't deserve to really receive unconditional love. So we're always looking for
Mm.
the evidence of where we're not loved, where we're unlovable, right? So so you put somebody on the mat and you invite them to liberate. You invite them to open. And
Mm.
then you watch how their nervous system contracts and how their stories prevent them from fully liberating. And then we invite practices
Mhm.
and somatic coaching and the support of the group to help that person go through the
Mhm.
contraction, the stories, and the limitations that they have imposed on themselves in order to go deeper and further into that range, into that part of themselves, into that aspect. So we call them liberation
Mhm.
circles.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
that's one
Wow.
part of the
Beautiful.
mat that people come in to liberate dormant shadows, dormant
Mhm.
energetic emotional ranges. But there's also something else that often happens when people go onto the mat, and that is there is a part, I wouldn't even say a part, our our being is so intelligent. And I don't, when I say being, I don't mean the mind. I mean the body wisdom and the energetic wisdom, the nervous system wisdom, the somatic wisdom, the non-mental wisdom. It knows. And there's a saying in HeartIQ that says all healing has its time. And what we do in Circle is we train somebody to recognize the symptoms of it's time. I don't know what, don't know why, don't know how. And my impulse is to now move on to the mat. And when somebody comes onto the mat in that type of intuitive, emergent way where they don't even know why, in fact, they don't even want to, but they feel they have to, there's an
Mm-hmm.
intelligence running the show that they're surrendering to. And this quality of surrender
Mm-hmm.
is potent and powerful in Circle. This capacity to allow myself to be supported by the tribal intelligence, a collective field, where the field might have answers and
Mm-hmm.
information and medicine, as we call it, that I don't have on my own. And that if we surrender
Mm-hmm.
together, there can be something quite magical and a healing that we just couldn't
Mm-hmm.
access on our own or one to one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, thank you. Now, is this experience, is it something energetic? And is it all about cathartic experience or are there also like calm experiences?
You said cathartic, and then you said, did you say calm? Yeah, like as in,
Calm, yeah.
yeah,
Like
yeah. Got
soothing,
it.
calm,
Just wanted to
soft.
make sure. Um, when I'm in, when I'm facilitating Circle, I don't have an agenda to push people into catharsis. Catharsis, for those people who may not know, it's the word we use to describe emotional expression in a very uncontained way. So when people just want to scream, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big fan of catharsis
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of catharsis. I'm a big fan of honoring what's
Mm-hmm.
alive and meeting what needs to be met and pulling forth from whoever's taking space what is actually needed. And sometimes what's needed is catharsis. And sometimes what's needed is to be totally held, like you said, to be regulated or put into a calm space where they can actually rest. The
Mm-hmm.
prescription or the direction to go is not built on some mental toolbox or a modality step by step. It's a practice of attunement and listening. So as I feel the circles, I feel the field, as I feel who they are. Now, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, if somebody takes space, why would you feel the field to discover what they need? Why not feel them? Well, I do, but I get a lot of
Mm-hmm.
clues from the field because as soon as somebody goes on the mat, the field reverberates like an echo chamber. Like the impact that that
Mm-hmm.
person has on the field tells me a lot. So how the field feels
Yeah.
in this person's presence is part of the diagnostic to let me
Mm-hmm.
feel what needs to happen next. Because somebody might come on
Yeah.
the mat and they say, I need to get angry. But in fact, what's underneath that is grief. And if we only went
Mm-hmm.
to catharsis of rage, the field would go flat. It would just feel like they would check out, they would feel a bit tense, they'd get a bit bored, they would feel disengaged, dissociated, they'd feel something is off. So I'm constantly reading the room when somebody's on the mat to see if what's happening on the mat is in fact aligned with truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. You use the words embodiment and imprinting. Can you say something about
Sure.
these words?
So embodiment is the act of bringing ourselves present with our somatic, embodied, physical experience and
Mm.
sensations. So it's basically going from head to body. It's translating the world not just from a thought based perspective or cognitive based perspective, but learning to feel what's actually happening on the body level, noticing that
Mm.
our body has information and it's about inhabiting the body. And what that basically means is, rather than walking through life as a talking head, to include all of our body in our expression, in our
hmm
communication, in how we make love, in how we relate, in how we work. It's like it's including the wisdom of the body. It's about including the depth of feeling of this present moment. It's like emotions and being touched by the world. It
Yeah.
occurs through the body. We don't feel our emotions in our head. Emotions are a somatic, embodied experience, right? So to become
hmm
embodied is to become present with the body. And yet that isn't easy, because as soon as we bring presence to the body, we naturally feel the undigested charge that's stored in the body. So
hmm
all of our
hmm
unprocessed emotions and wounds are like put into our body. And so we don't want to feel that. So we disembody, we check out, we dissociate, so that we get distracted. We get distracted by future thinking, or the thoughts I want to worry about, past thinking, all the things I regret, and the stuff that still lingers from my old life. And we don't get fully present. We distract through social media, through different types of mechanisms, and we ultimately end up not present. So presence, and then
hmm
presencing in the body, is what actually creates this state of embodied awareness. And it feels very different to like the
hmm
intellectual cognitive awareness that many of us are used to. So that's what
hmm
embodiment is.
hmm
Imprinting is the uh, powerful act of being inspired at a body level of somebody else's embodiment. So let's say you say
hmm
something that was really inspiring to me and to my mind. That wouldn't be an imprint, that would be an inspiration. You have shared something, and my mind goes, whoa, incredible. Thank you. I feel inspired. But let's say you showed me something through your body, a range of expression. You were able to show me you fully inhabiting and owning an energy, or a shadow range, or a part of you that it was not necessarily what you say verbally, but just your beingness. It's like, whoa, now I
hmm
know what it looks like when somebody is fully owning and inhabiting this. And I'm like touched by
Yeah.
it. And it's that being touched. And it's almost like an imprint is like a photograph of somebody else's being that you can use to emulate, and it gives you the codes. I don't know if this sounds a bit too woo woo, but um, let's say, for example, I talked a bit earlier about my father, and I love my dad. He is an amazing man, and he has so
hmm
many wonderful qualities. So when I bring stuff like this, it's not to say he was some evil dude that abused me when I was young and all of that and was a bad guy. He wasn't. I mean, he has his own trauma, and this type of generational stuff gets passed on, right? And yet, growing up, he was not emotionally available. He was not attuned to my emotional needs. He didn't prioritize connecting with me. His work and his busyness meant that I was left feeling deprived of that kind of parental, deep, attuned, nurturing, nourishing touch as well from my father's side.
hmm
Now, what that means is that I'm not getting an imprint of what it means to be fully loved by my father. I've not received all the codes to activate my own masculine, my own manhood. So it's like getting an
hmm
incomplete download. I didn't get the full transmission. My father didn't have all the codes in himself to give me. So what he modeled wasn't a complete picture of what I needed. So I needed to go and search and complete the blueprint by finding the missing codes, by getting imprinted by other male role models. Neil Donald Walsh was one of them. And I could
Mhm.
count at least
Mhm.
5 different people, all mentors, powerful male mentors in my life, that were able to imprint and complete the transmission so that I could come alive
Mhm.
in my fullness, in my purpose, and in my work. Does that make sense?
Wow. Wow. Very beautiful. Christian, can I ask you, are you religious?
No. I think that's the easiest answer. I have a deep connection with source, with the divine. I feel the presence of something bigger. It's an internal spirituality rather than an external religion that I kind of relate to. There are certain religious traditions
Yeah.
that I kind of honor and feel like touched by. And I
Yeah.
respect those people who practice religion because it feels culturally like it brings them home and together.
Mhm.
It becomes an issue for me when religion is used as dogma, as a way to live for other people, and they should live this way. And it becomes like an authoritarian um, way to live where my God is better than your God. And if you don't agree with me, I have the authority to kill you. So that kind of like extreme religion. And I also think that religion is centered
Mhm.
on control and, like I said, something external telling us what is our truth. So I have a deep inner connection to God, to the divine, to the transpersonal, to prayer, to this sense
Mhm.
of church, temple, the sacred.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I find that in my body, I find that in nature, I find that in sex, I find that in moments of presence. Um, and I find it most in circle. That is my church. It's my temple. It's my
Mm,
holy
mm,
space.
mm,
The
mm,
mat is holy
mm,
ground in that regard. So, um,
mm.
so am I spiritual? Yes. Am I religious? No. If you define religious as what I've just said is spirituality, then I guess yes. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. So, you talked about an amplified field. What is an amplified field? And if you have trauma, like what is trauma and how does the amplified field support this?
So I'll first start by talking about trauma. Trauma is the
Mhm,
held charge in the body that creates a diminished range or function in that person's being. So, for example,
mhm,
if you had a bad event happen to you, but you were able to shake it off and your nervous system went into a freeze, but then you were able to re enter a normal state of function. That's not trauma, that's just a normal event. You might have been
mhm,
wounded for a moment, but you healed. Trauma is what happens when you don't heal. So something bad happened to you, and the diminished freeze stays in your system. So now it's like it's
mhm,
like
mhm,
it's a permanent reduced capacity to open and to feel safe and connected. And inherent in that
mhm,
reduced capacity is charge, meaning a tension that's stored as part of the biopsychosocial memory of what happened. In other words, inside that charge is often the age when it happened, feelings that weren't able to be processed in the
mhm,
moment because it was too much, too soon, too fast. and it all gets locked in, and it creates a rigidity. It becomes like a scar where we don't have flexibility and resilience and adaptivity, or adaptability, I should say. So traumas are stored in the body. They're from times when we were wounded and we weren't able to repair, which means when the wound happened, we didn't get a corrective experience. We weren't met, we weren't soothed, we weren't held, we weren't heard. And we carried those micro or macro or small T's or big T's into our life. And it then has impact in our life. It comes up in our relationships. It comes up in our work. It comes up into our everyday life as a diminished capacity to be and feel alive. Now, often what happens with trauma is that these get stored in the body, and the body starts to develop some pretty sophisticated defense mechanisms to disconnect ourselves from these parts in our body. So it's like they become a little bit hidden under the surface. So, and this is important. This allows us to stay functional. Because if we were always alive with what was there, we may not get through our day. It may be too overwhelming. So our traumas are often, by design, kind of wrapped around kind of like walled gardens. It's not always easy to penetrate into those parts. So they have an impact in our life. We see the symptom of that diminished range in our life, but we don't always feel the direct wound anymore. We just notice the impact of that wound in everyday life. So when we enter into an amplified field, so now imagine you're sitting in a circle. You're not just sitting with one other human being. You're sitting now maybe with 15 to 30 different nervous systems. And when those 15 to 30 nervous systems sync up, it creates this resonant, strong field that is amplified. In other words, we have our own energetic presence on our own. And when we connect in with others, and there's a sense of resonance and coherence, our energy can combine with other energies and they begin to build into a single energy. Now, an amplified field does not happen just by sitting together with random people. You need to bring people together, and then you need to train the field to come into coherence. Just like if you had an orchestra and everyone's playing their own instrument, it's not music, it's just often cacophony. It just doesn't sound right. But there needs to be entrainment and coherence and syncing up that allows for that orchestra to play symphony. So my role as a conductor of circle is to take these individual energy units and turn them into a coherent orchestra of energy, and then it becomes a field. And an amplified field is basically a way of describing that anything you feel when you sit in that field becomes amplified. So, for example, I might not be able to feel much on my own, but as soon as I sit in circle, I start to feel grief. And I'm like, where am I feeling that? What is, it could be mine, it could be somebody else's. But what happens is that when you start to sit in circle, these defenses and these walled gardens that I spoke about that are surrounding your traumas, they get penetrated by the field. We can't access them, but the field can. The amplified energy of sitting in a field can help us access the parts that we can't access on our own. Because the amplified energy is strong enough, coherent enough, safe enough to enter.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You know, when people go through the process of growing up, just everybody, and then they become aware of this, and then they have this choice to embark on this journey of reclaiming their own wholeness, right? Why do we need this? Like, was this not needed before? Because probably people weren't doing this 100 years ago or something.
Yeah, this is a great question. I mean, like, why do our inner work and why weren't our ancestors necessarily? Well, I think there's so many different flavors here, um, and different nuances. Let me see if I can add some tangible way, given the time we have left. Um,
Hmm.
I don't, it's, a lot of people say, oh, everyone needs to do this. I don't think anybody needs to do it. I think there are a group of us that are hungry for seeking beyond our survival needs and living life in a level of, okay, I've got my life sorted. This is the way my life is. That people are seeking greatness. They're seeking more. They're seeking what's possible. They're seeking um, like expansion, like liberation in consciousness. There's a hunger to develop oneself for the betterment of themselves and mankind and womankind and all of humanity. It's like there's something that drives at a soul level this growth. And I think we're in a privileged
Mm.
time where we have enough of our survival needs met, where we can even ask these questions and devote time and resources to that. Maybe in our past, that wasn't the case. Um, we were struggling to make ends meet. Plus, this awareness wasn't really all there. To our ancestors, what they had really was, when I say ancestors, let's just talk about recent, to our previous generations, they had religion.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
Before that, you know, we had, well, some pretty deep connection to nature that's been lost. You start looking at some of the cultural things that have happened and the way that we're more disconnected from ourselves and each other than we've ever been. Maybe our
mm,
ancestors didn't
mm,
need that in so much because there was such a natural connection to the stars, to land, to each other, to tribe, to family. Not to say their lives were perfect or anything like that or
yeah,
easy. No, probably not at all. But I think there's a consequence to us living in the kind of culture that we live in. But I do believe there's an
mm,
acceleration of sorts. Like it's taken us many millennia to get to here, and we're kind of moving very quickly into the future. And we're in a period of
mhm,
time that's very
mhm,
chaotic and some might call dark, but out of that shadow, collectively, we're entering a golden age, is my belief.
mhm, mhm. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for everything you've shared. I really appreciate it. It's super interesting, and the way you explain things, uh, very beautiful. You have a way of really eloquently
Hmm.
speaking. It's like
Oh,
water just
thank you.
flowing. So thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Would you like to share